work our way through all of the cells that follows an ovulated egg. So in the ovary, the oocyte, or the egg, is going to start to mature as part of a cluster of cells that we call a follicle. When we ovulate that egg, some of those cells that allowed it to mature follows the egg into the fallopian tube. So you have to go through those cells, and another layer of a barrier also surrounding the egg called the corona radiata, and you need this enzyme called the acrosome to allow the sperm cell to work its way through all those cells, through the plasma membrane, so then you can eventually have the nucleus penetrate the egg and then fertilize the egg. So you need this acrosome right here. Now, we have heard before that the mitochondria only comes from our mothers, right? And the reason why is simple. Mitochondria has its own DNA, not coded for in the nuclear DNA. So only the head of the sperm cell ever penetrates through the plasma membrane and fertilizes it. Now, again, right, the mitochondria for dad is always stored in this tail region. That never gets through. So dad's mitochondria never enters the oocyte. Only the nuclear DNA enters the oocyte. So dad's mitochondria is not found in any of the offsprings. Whether the offspring is male or female, doesn't matter, right? All babies get their DNA, their mitochondria from mom only. So let's talk about some of the things that we do, that our body does, that allows us to kind of get ready. And also this real thing that we'll talk about in chapter 29 about testosterone. Now, we kind of saw that at puberty, testosterone is going to stimulate the male reproductive system to produce sperm, right? Now, what we're going to see as well, testosterone is actually released really, really early on in gestation. And then you don't see any increase in testosterone until you hit puberty again. So you have this long period, right, between when you're first conceived, when your ducts that will turn into the male ducts develop, right, that those ducts develop because of testosterone real early on prenatally. When testosterone is released, they can be released by the same cells, the latex interstitial cells, and what testosterone does early on in gestation. So we're talking about the first trimester here. Well, what it does is it causes the male genitalia to form real early on. So then you'll have the penis that develops, the vas deferens, the epididymis, all of that has to develop in response to testosterone. Once that occurs, then the latex cell stays quiet until puberty. So you have this early release of testosterone that allows the male ducts to form, and then you're going to have almost like a 12-year gap, 13-year gap between another big batch of testosterone release. Right. Now, in terms of here, the urethra and everything, like a lot of this is going to be, anatomy stuff, so I'm not going to go through it too much, but understand that when we're talking about a vasectomy cuts the vas deferens. As it cuts the vas deferens, then the sperm cells that are stored in the epididymis that are formed in the testes, well, those sperm cells can't get through and go into the ejaculatory duct. So you can still have emission, but the emission, the ejaculate itself, will be absent of sperm cells. Now, what was found then in the ejaculate then, right? The ejaculate would then have secretions from our seminal vesicles, which produces 60% of the semen, and more importantly, secretes fibrinogen. Then the prostate gland adds another 30%, which also allows us to have clotting factors, and then this big one right here, fibrinolysin. So the seminal vesicles allows us, and the combination of fibrinogen and clotting factors allows us to kind of concentrate all that sperm right at the opening of the cervix. And then the fibrinolysin lyses that concentrate, so then the sperm can work its way through into the uterus, into the fallopian tubes. So that is how, I mean, if you think about the mechanism here, it's kind of crazy. It really should increase the chance of having babies here. What else do we see? Right, in terms of semen, we kind of describe this right here. And then this picture of how the GnRH works. I like the previous one a little bit better, right? It's a little bit easier to read as well. Now, puberty in males. Before birth, placenta secretes human chorionic gonadotropin, which will allow and activate the testosterone production by testes, right, that are found in that developing fetus. So we're talking about really early on. By the way, do you know what HCG is? HCG is the hormone they use for, right, to measure pregnancy, right? So if you have even a 12-year-old child, little girl, and it sounds kind of crazy because this does happen. If they have any kind of abdominal pain, the first thing they ask is, are you sexually active, right? And if they are, God forbid, at 12, right? If they are, then they will see and they'll test for HCG to see for look for signs of that pregnancy. So let's talk about the female reproductive system right here, and we'll talk about, you know, the ligaments coming up when we're talking about, you know, when we look at the actual models. In terms of the female reproductive system, how the actual, you know, gametes, they're very different than the males. So in the male testes, we're going to see that if we do a testicular exam, the testes itself should be nice and smooth. The ovaries are completely different, right? What we're going to see is that in order for ovulation to occur, it's almost like you're squeezing the egg out and then kind of making sure that it gets expelled from the ovary. So it is not something that is not violent, right? So what happens is you're actually kind of pushing and expelling the oocyte out. And in the process, scar tissue can form afterwards. And in the process, that scar tissue in some people can form cyst. And you get polycystic ovarian disease. That does happen, and it's pretty common. Now, what else happens is you start having bumps on the ovaries, right? Even if you don't have polycystic ovarian disease, you start having bumps here from scar tissue formation from all the ovulated cycles that we have. So, unlike the testes, the ovary should be nice and bumpy and not smooth. Now, if we start seeing cysts, then we might start seeing some issues here. Now, what else is different between the ovaries and the testes is that, unlike the testes, where it's separated into compartments, the ovary has an external area, right, that we call the cortex. This is where the actual oocyte starts to develop and mature and get ovulated out. And it's got an internal area that's very vascular, that allows for hormones to enter this region, that allows hormones from the follicle to also enter the bloodstream. So in terms of the arrangement and the structure of the ovaries and the testes are completely different, right? The testes, segmented, turn into compartments. Ovaries, cortex, medulla, each region with separate functions. Now, the numbers are pretty crazy.